In the last desperate months of World War II, a ship pushed out into the freezing black waters of the Baltic Sea. Now, this wasn't a battleship on some attack run. It was a vessel crammed with thousands of people, all of them just trying to escape with their lives. Its sinking would become the single deadliest maritime disaster in all of human history. And yet, for decades, its story was just gone, lost in this weird, haunting silence. A silence that we are about to break. 9,343. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's not a statistic. It's the estimated number of lives that were lost. Men, women, and literally thousands of children, all swallowed by the freezing dark in just a matter of minutes. Look, we all know the story of the Titanic, right? We've all seen the movie. The loss of 1,500 people became this legendary tragedy. But the Wilhelm Gustloff, its death toll was more than 6 times bigger. I mean, try to imagine 6 Titanics sinking on the exact same night. That is the insane scale of what we're talking about here. So that brings us to the big question, the real mystery of this whole thing. How does a disaster this huge, one that makes one of the most famous shipwrecks in the world look small, just vanish from our collective memory? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back and look at the ship itself. You see, the Wilhelm Gustloff wasn't really just one ship. In a lot of ways, it was 2. It had this first life of, dazzling promise, and a second life of just grim, desperate service. And understanding that duality is really the key to its whole story. So, before the war, the Gustloff was the crown jewel of the Nazis' Strength Through Joy program. I want you to picture this gleaming white cruise liner. It was built to give loyal German workers a taste of luxury travel. It was this powerful symbol of leisure, but also, let's be honest, a really potent propaganda machine. But the war changed everything. The beautiful cruise ship got a new coat of drab gray paint, and it became a military transport, a floating barracks. What was once this symbol of joy was now just another tool of war. And here's the crucial part. After years of this kind of service, it was not in a truly seaworthy condition when it was called up for its final tragic mission. So how did this beat-up, repurposed ship end up in the crosshairs of a Soviet submarine? Well, it was all part of one of the biggest and frankly most chaotic naval evacuations in history. By January of 1945, the war on the Eastern Front was just a total catastrophe for Germany. The Soviet Red Army was advancing with terrifying speed, pushing through the snow and ice, and they trapped more than 1 million German civilians and soldiers in a region called East Prussia. The land routes were gone. The only way out was the sea. This order from the head of the German Navy, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, just shows you how desperate things had gotten. The mission was called Operation Hannibal, and it was a frantic, all-hands-on-deck push to get as many people out as possible. Seriously, anything that could float was being used. The whole situation was just unbelievably dangerous. The evacuation was pure chaos. The weather? Atrocious. A brutal Baltic winter, with temperatures dropping to -10 Celsius, that's 14 Fahrenheit, in the middle of a heavy, blinding snowstorm. To make matters worse, the equipment on the ship's military escort was literally freezing over, making its submarine sensors totally useless. And into this mess, more than 10,000 people crammed their way onto the Wilhelm Gustloff. We'll actually never know the exact number because in the sheer panic to get on board, the crew just stopped counting. Now you have to remember, this was a ship that was designed for just under 1,500 passengers. It was now holding 7 times that many people. They were everywhere, in every cabin, every hallway, every open space on the decks, and packed in among them were an estimated 5,000 children. The stage was absolutely set for a disaster. You have this poorly maintained, dangerously overcrowded ship, sailing through an active war zone, in a blizzard, with a nearly defenseless escort. It was a ticking time bomb. And that's when it was spotted. Out there in the dark, the Soviet submarine S-13, commanded by a Captain Alexander Marinsko, found the Gustloff. With the escort's sonar frozen solid and completely useless, the submarine could just stalk its target, totally undetected, and slide into the perfect attack position. The end came with terrifying speed. At 9 p.m., the torpedoes are launched. Just moments later, they rip into the ship's hull. Absolute panic erupts in the total darkness. The ship immediately starts to list hard to one side, which made escape almost impossible.
Lifeboats were either smashed in the explosions or just couldn't be launched from the high side of the deck. Less than 40 minutes after that first explosion, the Gustloff was gone, plunging bow first into the black water. For the thousands of people who were thrown into that freezing Baltic Sea, or for those trapped below decks, the nightmare was really just beginning. Your chances of surviving in those conditions were basically zero. Of the more than 10,500 people that we think were on board, only 1,252 would make it out alive. Over 9,300 people died that night. Now, German torpedo boats and minesweepers did race to the scene. They started pulling survivors from the water in the pitch-black blizzard. I mean, their efforts were absolutely heroic, but against the sheer scale of this disaster, they could only save a tiny fraction of the people on board. So we come back to that central question. A tragedy of this scale, an event this horrific, how did it become just a footnote in the history books?
Well, the reasons are complicated and, frankly, pretty uncomfortable. First, the victims were Germans, citizens of the nation that started the war. And their suffering was just easily overlooked at a time when the world was discovering the full horrors of the Nazi regime. The news was completely buried under the chaos of Germany's final collapse. And then there's the military angle. The Gustloff was a military transport. It was carrying military personnel, it was armed with anti-aircraft guns, and it was sailing in a declared war zone. Under the rules of war, that made it a legitimate target. Today, the wreck of the Wilhelm Gustloff lies in about 44 meters of water right off the coast of Poland. It's officially designated a war grave. It's protected under Polish law. It's the final resting place for over 9,000 souls. And any diving on the site is strictly forbidden. It's a solemn recognition of the immense loss of life. And maybe that's the real takeaway from this forgotten story. The Wilhelm Gustloff is this powerful reminder that history isn't just written by the victors. It's also shaped by what we, as a society, choose to remember and what we allow ourselves to forget. It really forces you to ask, why do some tragedies become legends, while others, even the biggest of them all, can just be swallowed by the silence?